Before I tell you about the knock at my door that changed everything, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you looked at someone you've loved your whole life, a parent, a partner, a child, and realized you were looking at a stranger? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading them from my porch here in the misty hills of Oregon, and I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Hold on just a moment before we continue. If this story is touching something in you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference and helps me bring you more stories like this one. I also want to hear from you. Write in the comments. Where are you right now? Are you tucked away in a peaceful village where stars fill the sky, or surrounded by the hum and glow of a city that never sleeps? Now, let me take you back to a rainy November afternoon. The house was quiet. It was that specific kind of quiet you only get when you live alone in a house built for a family. My husband, Arthur, had passed 3 years prior, and my son, Lucas, was a busy architect in Chicago, living a life of steel beams and deadlines that I only glimpsed in hurried phone calls. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, watching the rain streak against the glass, nursing a cup of Earl Grey that had gone tepid. I was sorting through a stack of junk mail, grocery coupons, charity solicitations, a catalog for winter coats I didn't need. That's when I heard it. A knock. It wasn't the aggressive rap of a delivery driver or the hesitant tap of a neighbor borrowing sugar. It was 3 solid, deliberate thuds against the heavy oak wood. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart gave a little flutter, not of fear, really, but of intrusion. My solitude had become a comfortable, thick blanket, and I didn't like pulling it back. When I opened the door, the gray light of the afternoon spilled onto the entryway floor. Standing there, dripping wet in a canvas jacket that had seen better days, was a man I almost didn't recognize. He had a beard now, thick and dark, and lines around his eyes that spoke of long nights and hard weather. But when he looked up, I saw the boy underneath. It was Elias. He had been Lucas's roommate in college, a chaotic whirlwind of a boy who used to eat everything in my refrigerator during spring breaks. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Back then, he was all nervous energy and loud laughter. Now, he stood on my porch like a statue, twisting a wet beanie in his large, rough hands. "Mrs. Vaughn," he asked. Then he winced. "I mean Eleanor."
"Sorry."
"It's been a while." "Elias," I breathed, stepping back instinctively. "My goodness. You're soaked to the bone. Come in, please." He hesitated, looking at his muddy boots. "I don't want to track anything in." "Nonsense," I said, finding a motherly tone. I thought I'd retired. "Floors wash. People catch colds. Get inside." The living room was warm, smelling of the dried lavender I keep in a bowl on the mantel and the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke. Elias stood by the fireplace, not too close, just enough to let the heat radiate toward him. He looked out of place among my floral upholstery and porcelain figurines, a rugged, storm-tossed element brought indoors. "Is Lucas all right?" I asked. It's the universal frequency mothers operate on. The panic button is always half-pressed. Elias turned quickly, his eyes wide. "Oh, yes. Yes, he's fine. Physically, he's great. Promoted again, I hear." "You hear? You don't talk." "Not much lately," Elias admitted. He took a deep breath, and I saw his shoulders rise and fall heavily. "I didn't come here because he asked me to. I came because I was driving through to the coast and I realized I was only 20 miles away. And I've been carrying something around for a long time that belongs to you." I motioned for him to sit. He took the sturdy wingback chair, sitting on the edge as if prepared to bolt. I went to the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I put the kettle on. Why were my hands shaking? It was just Elias. But the air in the room had changed. It had thickened. When I returned with 2 fresh mugs, Elias was staring at a framed photo of Lucas from his graduation day. Lucas looked so young, so sure of himself, his arm draped around a much younger, clean-shaven Elias. "He never told you about the winter of 2018, did he?" Elias asked softly, not looking away from the photo. 2018? I racked my brain. That was the year he was working on the Skyline project in Seattle. He was so busy, he couldn't come home for Christmas. Elias turned to me, and his expression was unreadable. It was a mix of pity and resolve. He wasn't working on the Skyline project, Eleanor. He'd been let go 3 months prior. He was living in his car. The mug in my hand clinked against the saucer. What? He didn't want to disappoint you, Elias said, the words tumbling out now. Arthur had just gotten sick. Lucas felt. He felt like he had to be the success story you all needed. So he pretended. He sent emails during business hours. He posted old photos. But at night, he was parking in a lot behind a gym where I had a membership so he could shower. I felt the blood drain from my face. I sat down opposite him, the room suddenly spinning. My son, my proud, brilliant boy, sleeping in a sedan in the freezing Seattle rain while I sat here warm, knitting him a scarf he probably never received. Why are you telling me this now? I whispered. Because Elias leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. That was the year he changed. It wasn't the job that made him the man he is now. It was the fact that he pulled himself out of it. He started volunteering at the shelter while he was staying there. He designed a new intake system for them. He got a job not as an architect, but as a framer, hammering nails in the snow until he saved enough for an apartment. He rebuilt himself from zero, Eleanor. And he thinks you don't know that version of him. He thinks you only love the version that wins awards. I sat in silence. The clock on the wall ticked, tick-tock, tick-tock, a rhythmic reminder that time had passed and I had missed it. I had missed his struggle. I had missed his hunger. He made me promise never to tell, Elias said, his voice dropping. But I saw him last month at a conference. He looks tired, Eleanor. He's keeping up the facade, but it's heavy. I thought, maybe if you knew, you could tell him he doesn't have to carry it anymore. The conversation that followed wasn't linear. We didn't just stick to the facts. Elias told me about the nights they sat on the hood of that car, sharing cheap pizza, talking about fears and failures. He told me about the time Lucas gave his only winter coat to a kid who had none. He painted a portrait of my son that was grittier, darker, and infinitely more beautiful than the one I had in my head. When Elias finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun setting somewhere behind the heavy clouds. I shouldn't have stayed so long, he said, pulling his cap back on. You stayed exactly as long as you needed to, I said. I walked him to the door. Elias. Yeah, thank you. For being there when I wasn't. He gave me a sad, crooked smile. He's a good man, Eleanor. He just needs to know you see him. After his truck rumbled down the driveway and disappeared around the bend, the house felt entirely different. The furniture, the walls, the photos, it all looked the same, but the context had shifted. It was as if someone had come in and adjusted the lens on a camera. Everything was sharper. I didn't cook dinner that night. I wasn't hungry. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and walked from room to room. I went into Lucas's old bedroom, preserved like a museum exhibit from 1999. Trophies on the shelf. Posters of bands I never liked. I touched the fabric of his old bedspread. I realized then that I had been mourning the distance between us, blaming his career, blaming his busy city life. But the distance wasn't geographical. It was emotional. He was hiding his scars because he thought I required perfection. And hadn't I? Hadn't I always praised his grades, his promotions, his accolades? Had I ever praised his resilience? Had I ever praised his ability to survive? That night, sleep was elusive. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle, hearing the wind rattle the gutters. I thought about the pride of a mother and how dangerous it can be. We want our children to shine so brightly that we forget they sometimes need the dark to rest. The next morning, to my surprise, Elias returned. I was in the garden, deadheading the last of the chrysanthemums, wearing my old rubber boots. I heard the crunch of gravel and looked up to see his truck again. He stepped out, looking less like a messenger of doom and more like a man who just wanted to be helpful. I forgot my gloves, he lied. I knew he hadn't worn gloves. Coffee is on, I said, smiling. This second visit was different. The heavy lifting was done. The secret was out. Now we were just two people connected by a common love for a complicated man. We sat on the back porch this time. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Elias helped me fix a loose hinge on the garden gate, a task I'd been putting off for months. He was handy, efficient, and quiet in a way that felt companionable rather than awkward. You know, he said, testing the swing of the gate. I used to be jealous of Lucas. Whatever for? I asked, handing him a screwdriver. He had this place. He had you. My folks, they were pretty checked out. Lucas always had a home base. I think that's why he was so ashamed when he lost his footing. He felt like he was losing his right to come back here. He never lost that right, I said firmly. He never could. Logic doesn't always drive the bus, Eleanor. Elias chuckled. Fear is a pretty loud driver. We spent the afternoon talking about everything except Lucas. Elias told me about his own life. He was restoring old motorcycles now, living in a small cabin near the coast. He talked about his regrets, about a marriage that didn't work out, about the peace he found in fixing broken things. I found myself opening up too. I told him about the loneliness of widowhood, the specific ache of not having anyone to tell about the funny thing you saw at the grocery store. I told him about my painting, a hobby I'd picked up and then abandoned because I didn't think I was good enough. Who cares if it's good? Elias asked, wiping grease from his hands. Does it make you feel something? It makes me feel quiet, I said. Focused. Then do it. The world has enough critics. It needs more people who are just doing what they love. When Elias left that second time, he didn't feel like a stranger anymore. He felt like a bridge. He had spanned the gap between my past and my present, and more importantly, he had built a walkway back to my son. 2 weeks later, Thanksgiving arrived. Usually, Lucas would call a week before with an excuse. He was swamped. The flights were delayed. He'd come for Christmas instead. But this time, after Elias left, I had written him a letter. I didn't mention Elias. I didn't mention the car or the homelessness or the lies. I simply wrote, I was looking at photos of you today. Not the graduation ones, but the one where you fell off your bike and scraped your knee and you got right back up. I'm proud of the architect, Lucas. But I'm most proud of the man who knows how to get back up. Come home. No fanfare. Just us. When he walked through the door, he looked thinner than I remembered. The expensive coat didn't hide the shadows under his eyes. But he was here. We went through the motions at first. How was the flight? And the traffic was terrible. But the tension was different. It wasn't the tension of avoidance. It was the tension of a dam about to break. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, root vegetables, wine. We sat at the small kitchen table, not the formal dining one. Mom, Lucas said, pushing a potato around his plate. This is nice. It's quiet. It is, I said. I took a sip of wine and looked him in the eye. Lucas, Elias stopped by a few weeks ago. His fork froze. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the other room. He went pale, his jaw tightening. He told you, Lucas said. It wasn't a question. He told me that you are the strongest man he knows, I said softly. He told me that you rebuilt your life with your bare hands. And he told me that you were afraid I wouldn't love the man who had to do that. Lucas looked down. I saw a tear, singular and heavy, drop onto the tablecloth. He wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the architect. He was my boy. I didn't want you to worry, he choked out. Dad had just died. You were alone. I was supposed to be the one taking care of things. Oh, Lucas. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was cold. You don't have to take care of me by lying to me. We are not a corporation. We are a family. We share the wins, but we have to share the losses too. Otherwise, what is all this for? He looked up then, and the mask finally crumbled. We talked for hours. We moved to the living room, drank too much coffee, and he told me everything. The shame, the fear, the cold nights, the kindness of strangers. He told me about the shelter he still volunteered at, the people he helped because he knew exactly how cold the floor felt. I listened. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't scold him for not calling. I just bore witness to his life. And in doing so, I felt myself changing too. I wasn't just mom anymore, the figurehead of safety and cookies. I was a confidant. I was a fellow traveler. I realized that by protecting me from his truth, he had denied me the chance to know him fully. And by accepting his truth, I was finally earning the relationship I wanted. The months that followed were a revelation. Lucas didn't quit his job, but he stopped letting it define him. He started coming home more often, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to sit on the porch and breathe. And Elias? He became a fixture in his own right. He dropped by every few months when he was hauling parts up the coast. Sometimes Lucas was there, and the three of us would have dinner, laughing about the old days. But sometimes it was just Elias and me. We'd walk in the park near the cliffs. He'd ask about my painting, which I had started again, thanks to him. I'd ask about his motorcycles. It was a friendship that defied easy labels. He wasn't my son, and he wasn't my peer, really. He was a kindred spirit, a reminder that connection can be found in the most unexpected places. One afternoon, about a year after that first knock, I was sitting by the window again. The weather was identical to that first day, rainy, gray, blustery. I had a canvas set up in the corner, a half-finished landscape of the coastline in stormy blues and grays. I saw a car slow down outside, but it didn't stop. It just drove on. I smiled and turned back to my tea. I wasn't waiting for the world to come to me anymore. I was already part of it. I realized that we spend so much of our lives building walls to keep the bad weather out, to keep the perfect image in. But it's the cracks, the broken gates, the lost jobs, the unplanned visits that let the light in. Elias, didn't just bring me news about my son. He brought me permission. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to see people for who they are, not who I want them to be. And permission to let my own life expand, even when I thought the borders were drawn and set. Growth is a strange thing. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It just knocks, quietly, firmly, and waits for you to have the courage to open the door. So, my friends, I want you to think about the doors you've kept locked. The conversations you're afraid to have. The people you think you know but haven't really looked at in years. Maybe it's time to open the door. Maybe it's time to let the rain in. You might find that it washes away everything you didn't need, leaving behind only what is true. This is Eleanor, signing off from the coast. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think of a son, a friend, or a secret burden you're ready to lay down, please do like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe. We have so many more stories to tell, and I'd hate for you to miss the next one. Take care of each other. And remember, you are never too old, and it is never too late to really know the people you love.